earlier. And the reason for this is very simple. We have gradually given you a number of teachings and tools so that when we give you a teaching about what blocks your divine plan, you have the teaching, you have the tools that you can begin to work on this as you see it individually. First of all, the book about my lives is a very important healing tool. I dare say that not even the messenger has with his outer mind grasped how many layers there are to this book. And of course, none of you need to grasp all of the layers. You just need to recognize that there are layers in this book. That means you can benefit from reading the book many times, because it is a very important tool for shifting your consciousness. And my beloved, one of the ways you need to shift your consciousness in order to come up to a higher grasp of your divine plan is that you have to do what you talked about in your previous discussion. You have to overcome this focus on the linear mind. As I said, many spiritual students have their conscious minds focused in the mental mind. You are trying to study and understand. You want to understand analytically. You often want to have a very linear timeline, a linear grasp of concepts. And this has not been wrong for you up until this point. But there does come a point on the spiritual path where you cannot go higher if you are focused on the linear mind. If your consciousness is, so to speak, attached to or trapped by the linear mind. And why is this, my beloved? Well, isn't it obvious? We have told you the lowest aspect of your mind is the physical, the next is the emotional, the next is the mental, and the highest is the identity mind. Well, I can assure you, my beloved, that your identity mind is not linear and analytical. It is the highest level of intuitive you can reach while you are in embodiment. So if you're going to shift your focus from the mental level to the identity level, you cannot do this through the linear analytical mind. You cannot analyze your way into the identity mind. You can only do this by opening your intuitive faculties. It is not a matter of knowing and understanding and grasping. It is a matter of experiencing intuitively. Because what is in your identity mind is subtle. And these are the teachings we have given you about the cosmic birth trauma, the primal self. These things are subtle. As the messenger expressed, they have facets, many facets. Your primal self cannot be defined in a very simple, linear, analytical way. It is not a matter of creating a mental label and saying, now I understand my primal self, this is what it is, and now I can let it die. Well, if you do this, it will still have hidden aspects that you have not even started to see, because you can only see those in an intuitive way. And so, how will you progress on the spiritual path beyond the mental level? Well, not through the analytical, intellectual, linear mind, only by shifting into the spherical, intuitive mind that looks at the wholeness, looks at the bigger picture, and is willing to say, is willing to grasp, to experience the truth of what I just told you, that we are not seeking to give forth one absolute linear truth. We are seeking to give forth many different concepts and ideas, because what is our purpose for interacting with Earth? It is not, my beloved, our purpose to bring forth an absolute truth. Our purpose is to raise people's consciousness, each person's state of consciousness. And this must be done individually, and that's why we must look at certain groups of people and say, we can give a teaching for a certain range of consciousness. And then we must be satisfied that it will reach a certain amount of people, And then we give other teachings for other levels of consciousness. So no messenger is meant to reach all 144 levels of consciousness. It would simply be impossible. And so we give teachings for a certain level. And I dare say, my beloved, that we have now given teachings through this messenger where you can start the course on self-mastery, the path to self-mastery at the 48th level, and come next year, when Saint Germain's book will be out, you can work your way up to the 96th level. And then you have all of the teachings, Maitreya's book, my book on the abundant life, the My Lives book, and the teachings on how to overcome your trauma that can take you higher. And I can assure you, my beloved, that the book on My Lives can be read by people from the 48th level all the way up to when they are almost ready to ascend, and they will still be able to find something new in it, something that can shift their perspective. So it is a book given for a very broad range of consciousness, and that is why there are certain things that are put into this book that are deliberately put in there as a provocation. Because what is the purpose, as I said, there comes a certain point where in order to bring you further, we have to take you beyond the linear mind. And the linear mind is the linear mind. It is like a computer. It will do what it always does. It will analyze, it will categorize, it will label. And my beloved, we can say all of these things. You can think, yes, but I understand this intellectually about the linear mind. But, my beloved, the linear mind may be able to understand the linear mind, but it will never be able to see the linear mind itself from the outside. The linear mind cannot step outside itself. Only the conscious you can step outside of the linear mind, outside of its current identification. And so, how can we help you switch out of the linear mind? By giving you a teaching that conforms to the linear mind's way of thinking. It cannot be done, my beloved. That is why certain Buddhist sects have the concept of the koan that is deliberately given to confuse the linear mind. What is the sound of one hand clapping? Well, this entire book is a koan. There are multiple koans in there that are meant to help people shift out of various levels of consciousness, not only the linear mind, but also the emotional, and even shift their identity. But this is done by giving you an experience that is so surprising, so provocative, so non-linear, that people must either completely reject it and thereby reject the book, or they must shift to a higher level of consciousness. There are very few people who can read this book and not be touched or provoked by it. Very few people. Of course, there are some. Most of them will be below the 48th level of consciousness. Some can be a little bit higher, but they can be very closed, very prejudiced. They can have certain ideas that they are absolutely not willing to question, and when they find that the book questions those ideas, they will reject it. But very few people can read it without having some reaction. And this is a very, very important tool when you understand this correctly. There are many of you who have been Ascended Master students for a long time, some of you for decades. And you need to be aware that there can come a point where you know so many teachings, you have read so many teachings that you almost become comfortable. You almost think that the Ascended Masters can't surprise you anymore. And there is almost an aspect of your mind that doesn't want us to surprise you, because you have become comfortable at the level you're at. Well, my beloved, I will tell you one thing. If you have a desire to be comfortable, you sure picked the wrong planet. Because this is not a planet on which to try to be comfortable. Throughout the ages, many people have tried to create certain physical outer situations in which they felt secure or comfortable. It's understandable, but look at history. The wheels of history have ground them all into dust. All the mighty empires have been ground into dust. And you cannot, on a planet like this, truly be comfortable. So, the challenge I put before you here is this. Do you want to know your divine plan, or do you want to be comfortable? Because you cannot do both. Most of you already have some conscious awareness of your divine plan. I understand that you do not see it in full detail, but I will explain, or we will explain later, the reasons for this. But you have some idea of your divine plan. Most of you have been following your divine plan to a large extent throughout your lives, even if you have not been consciously aware of this. But what I put before you is that you have reached a level now where there are certain aspects of your divine plan that you have not seen. Again, you have seen some aspects of your divine plan. You have followed your divine plan to a large extent. But there is something you have not yet seen. And you need to ask yourself, am I willing to see what I haven't seen? And if you are, then you need to recognize that you need to give up your comfortability in order to see this. Because the reason you haven't seen it is that you have adapted a certain outlook, a certain attitude, a certain understanding, and you don't think you need to go beyond it. But if you don't go beyond it, you cannot see the aspects that are of your divine plan that are still hidden for you. So this is the decision you need to make. And you need to make it, basically I'm asking you that as you go to sleep tonight, you make a call to be taken to whatever Ascended Master retreat you would like to go to. Whatever is closest to your heart. And then I ask you to seriously ask to be seen, to be shown, so that you can remember this tomorrow morning, what it is that you are too comfortable with that blocks your vision of your divine plan. Because you will not get the maximum benefit from this class and this teaching if you're still holding on to that comfortability. I'm not saying this is necessarily some big terrible thing you are doing. It can be a very subtle thing. But you understand that most of you have reached a level of the spiritual path where you have reached a level where there is not a risk that you will make some major mistake and start going downhill or fall into a lower state of consciousness or miss your ascension. You have reached a good level. You have made good progress. But if you want to step up higher, you cannot allow yourself to be comfortable. So this can be a very subtle thing where you feel that you have a certain comfortability, certain things you don't need to change. And again, I respect your free will. I am simply saying, if you really want to know the hidden aspects of your divine plan, you need to become aware that they are hidden, not because some dark force is obscuring them, not because we of the Ascended Masters are withholding them from you, but because there's some level of comfortability in your mind that is preventing you from seeing them. And so, this is the determination you need to make at this first day of the conference, so that you can be more open to what will give you in the coming days. Now, my beloved, I wish to also talk a little bit about how your divine plan is made. In the latest book by Nada, she talks about the fact that your divine plan is not made from the ascended state of consciousness, even though, of course, you have ascended masters that are helping you. But when you come into this lifetime, you have a high potential and a low potential. In other words, you have a potential that you could reach a certain level of consciousness if you keep transcending yourself and really apply yourself. And if you live a, so to speak, normal life, you will reach a lower state of consciousness. And so your divine plan is made from the highest level of consciousness to which you have the potential to rise to in this lifetime. In other words, when we meet with you and we make the divine plan with you, you are not at the same level of consciousness with which you left your last embodiment or with which you come into this embodiment. You are at the highest level of consciousness you have the potential to reach. And therefore, you can see what you can see from that level of consciousness when you make your divine plan. And so, I can assure you that when you make your divine plan, it is not made with a linear analytical mind. We are not sitting there with a linear mind analyzing every aspect of your past, your psychology, your this and that. And we are not like people on earth where you see business people or army leaders that are making a detailed plan and all of the things that have to fit into place for this plan to be executed. This is not how a divine plan is made. It is not linear analytical in that way. And that is another reason why, in order to grasp these hidden aspects of your divine plan, you have to overcome the linear mind. And many of you have become comfortable with the linear mind. You have even used the teachings of the Ascended Masters to create a linear view of the world where you feel you have figured out how the world works. You have an idea of past history and cosmic history and this and that, and you're comfortable with this. But I'm telling you that you need to step up higher in order to grasp the highest potential in your divine plan. And so that's why you need to be willing to step beyond this, and you need to recognize that the goal that both you and we have when we make your divine plan is, of course, to have you reach the highest level of consciousness you have the potential to reach. And a substantial portion of you have the potential for this to be your last embodiment, so that you can ascend either immediately after this embodiment or at least some time after, when you have resolved the last psychology and you are ready to ascend. And so this means that the question we ask ourselves when we are making your divine plan is, we look at the lowest level of consciousness, the level of consciousness you attained at your last embodiment and with which you will come into this present embodiment. And then we look at the highest potential and we say, how can we shift your conscious mind from that lowest consciousness to the highest? What are the prejudices, the filters, the holy cows in your four lower bodies that you need to challenge and see beyond in order to shift your consciousness to the highest level? What do you need to go through of experiences in order to shift your consciousness to the highest level? So you understand here that it is not our goal to have you grasp the highest absolute truth and understanding of the universe. It is not our goal to make you supreme spiritual intellectuals who have an absolute linear timeline for how the universe unfolded. Our goal is to shift your consciousness in a total way, in an intuitive, all-encompassing way, in an experiential way. And so, this is our goal. This is what we look at. And this has many ramifications which we will talk about, but I want you to keep this in mind for today, that it is important for you to make this shift where you are willing to look beyond your comfortability your linear mind, willing to consider not so much what understanding do I need, but what inner experience, what kind of an aha experience, a shifting experience, maybe even a shocking experience do I need